Welcome to this week's episode of 20 Minute Tims. Stephen, Melly, is squad depth a myth? Because that's what I'm. Is it a Christmas myth that I've been left thinking of after watching that Dundee United performance?
Are we going shock jock? Are we going clickbait already? That's the headlines this week. The
Christmas clickbait. I'm going to try and squeeze in as many crap Christmas puns as I can just to cheer myself up.
It's that time of year. If not, if it's for anything, it's for crap Christmas clickbait and puns for every podcast. Of course it is. The squad depth flip. I think as soon as that lineup was dropped for the Dundee United game, I thought to myself that has got dropped points written all over it. Now, I think it's unfair to say that it indicates we have a weak squad or not quite as strong a squad as we previously thought, because being reasonable about it, I think there are very few teams in Britain and Europe or whatever, right, who could cope without three of their first choice defenders. And
you sound like Ange. That's
like
right now.
yeah, I know. Having a pish squad is just who we are, mate. That's what it is. But also missing our most creative player and top scorer for the season as well. Now, I'm not making excuses. I'm trying to point to reasons why I think the game didn't really necessarily play out the way we'd have hoped. I think you add that to the fact that Jim Goodwin saw it as an opportunity to inflict some football terrorism on us on a Sunday afternoon. But I'm not blaming him. He's always going to sense that. And to be fair, he's not like Martindale or anything like that, in that he comes out and starts making excuses about budgets and all that. He's fairly clear about it. He comes out and says, look, I wanted a 0-0 draw and I got it. That was my objective for the game. Fair enough. So
it's a Christmas miracle.
Yeah. So it's up to Celtic to find a way around that. However, I just think too many missing, and we'll get into the reasons, but broadly speaking, too many missing, married to the fact that Jim Goodwin probably sensed an opportunity to just really, really frustrate Celtic, given the Celtic's slightly shaky form. That's 3 draws in a row, gentlemen. It's crisis, cracked crest. But yeah, I think it's unfair to say that it's a weak squad, but maybe some underlying issues have become maybe more apparent given the performance. Yeah,
Melly, it's I'm going to speak about the online fandom in a minute, because some people are really twisting my melons about things at the moment. But it is quite interesting how you get to just slice up results anyway. Like, I spoke about this before about how to make the argument, people go, well, we did this, or we've won 7 out of our last 14, or we've not been beaten in the last 10 games, but 8 of them are dropped. Whatever way you want to slice them. But as Stephen pointed out, that's 3 in a row that after 90 minutes Celtic have drawn. And to be honest, that's 3 in a row we should have won. You can slice it and say, well, it was this and it was that. Zagreb were there for the taking. We should have beaten them. Rangers, we should boss it over them every opportunity we get. And that was Dundee United away. So we're still undefeated, and I'll come to the arguments that I've seen online. Spoiler alert, I buy none of them.
I've seen your arguments. I don't like a single one of them.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's the phrase. That's the one I was looking for. But Melly, what do you make of this squad depth?
I think you'll find we've lost 1 game this calendar year, Jamie.
Yes,
so
there's a lot of that.
Yeah, I agree with you both that it's the sort of that marriage of Celtic having a lot of players out. And look, see if they have. I'm rewatching The Office, by the way, so there might be a lot of that in there. See if we have Liam Scales come in for a game. That's fine, as long as he's alongside Trusty or Carter Vickers, not alongside Welsh. If Ralston has to come in for a game, it's as long as it's alongside Carter Vickers and Trusty and so on. And then it's not even just the Kuhn being out. It's also, right, okay, Kuhn's out. We can maybe get through that game. James Forrest will come in. He's also out. So you're getting further and further down the pecking order. And to put it all into one, it's kind of gave me a bit of shudder when I seen it, because it just felt like a COVID lineup where you've had this illness go through the squad, which every team got, apart from one during that whole time. That there was only one team that never suffered from any of that. But it just felt like it was one of those games where horrible day up there. I am not joking when I say the wind chill up there was disgusting. It was horrendous.
Yeah, I did hear you on the post-match podcast, which, by the way, you can catch on Patreon. You said the wind chill was, you said, seriously, it was -90. I thought he's exaggerating a little bit.
They should not be playing football in -90. It's just unreasonable.
I'm not joking when I say this. The wind chill was -90. I thought, yeah, he's joking. He's got to be joking.
It was literally -90 in Dundee yesterday.
Oh, it was horrendous stuff. But I get like the whole squad depth thing. You can look at certain players, and there was just a few too many out. Married with that, with the guys that played aren't on form as well. I'm looking at Kyogo. I'm looking at Hatate. We know what it's like with Maeda. You can kind of tell what game he's going to have, and that's fine because you get what you get from him. But then when you look to the bench and you go, just leave him on actually, because there's no worth putting MD on. So it was just a marriage of all these things coming together, and a tough week after the cup final where we finally had a break. But it probably didn't do Celtic the world of good because there was illness going through the squad. But it just seemed like one of those games. If somebody had taken an opportunity, we would have won the game 1-0, and I think it would have been fine, probably like the Aberdeen game. And we get out there and go, write that one off, it was terrible, but we just didn't get that breakthrough, and it's just a couple of wee tweaks here and there might have done it, but it wasn't the best performance, and I think a lot of players are starting to look a bit off form.
Oh, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. And I was a bit jumped on your throat there when you said if we'd won 1-0, it would have been all right. Because, of course, we wouldn't be having this. We wouldn't be having this conversation. But I think there's more than a lot of players off form. I think Celtic have been crap for weeks, to be honest with you. I think we've been really, really off the boil for weeks. We've spoken in this podcast. If you go back and listen, we've been saying for weeks, it's starting to look a wee bit like give the ball to Kuhn and hope something happens. We had that very conversation after the Rangers game. Lo and behold, Kuhn misses a game and nothing happens. We don't have that outlet, give the ball to Kuhn and nothing happens. I think it's odd because we've been talking about how good the squad depth is, but it wasn't really those sort of second string. I lured you in there at the beginning of the podcast, you see, but it wasn't really those second string players that let us down.
No,
it was all the sort of mainstays that let us down, Melly. I'll let you jump in a sec, but Welsh and Scales and Ralston and all that were okay. Gucci Greg Taylor was back to his best. I think he was probably one of the best players on the park. But it was your Tate's, Maeda wasn't that great. Kyogo is wildly off the boil.
I think you've got right in for the Japanese players so far.
I know.
You've missed listed a single non-Japanese player between the three.
See that at the Gucci, man.
Do you know what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to avoid powering Engels for the 18th week in a row.
Did you see that
weird
weird...
McCowan, there's one for you. He wasn't very good either.
Did you see that weird moment a couple of weeks ago when I think it was after it was maybe after the Zagreb game, someone asked Brendan Rodgers, I think it may have been lost in translation, but it was a Croatian journalist had asked Brendan Rodgers why all the Japanese players were bad and why he took them all off, and he was kind of like, he was listening to his wee sort of translation device, and he was like,
pop it his ear.
It's like, nothing to do with them being Japanese, I promise. So it's just a bit weird, but no, like those are the guys we've come to rely on over the years that they've been here, and I think it is true that they've all been to varying degrees off form for a few weeks now, Kyogo especially, and I think we'll maybe come on to that, but it's funny how like there are problems that are always just under the surface with a club, well, really any club, but our focus is on Celtic, right? And as long as you're the winning machine, you're just ticking along, even if you are aware and acknowledge the problems, you don't care about them because you're winning and you think, right, Kyogo's not necessarily scoring goals, but that's okay just now because he does chipping in, and then
that's our job, isn't it? As pundits and watchers and podcasters is to sort of point this stuff out and say, well, hold on a minute, it's okay, we're not dropping points, but Kyogo's been crap, and Melly's been saying himself for weeks, he goes, I think it's time for Ida to start these games. Melly's pointed out specifically, you know, he thinks away games we need to see a bit more of Ida, and now I'm not saying he's some sort of prophet born again, but it has come to sort of pass that you're starting to notice how Kyogo is a wee bit off the boil now.
But with these problems, there sometimes can be many bubbling just under the surface, and as soon as you drop points, the perception of them changes. So it can go from Kyogo's not scored for a few weeks, but it's fine because we're getting team goals. And as soon as we drop points, we've been carrying this idiot for weeks. He's not kicked up. So.
It's like you guys were talking about on the phone, wasn't it? If Liam Scales gives away that penalty and Rangers score from it and Celtic don't go on to win the cup, which didn't happen, by the way. And you rightly pointed out as well, that only one team missed a penalty on that day, and it was Rangers, so the chances of them scoring it were whatever happens there. But it's that we get through, we win the cup. It's funny because we get the meltdown the whole week. And yes, it's been over a week and it's still going. But it's that perception that if we had lost that cup, Liam Scales gets absolutely pillared for giving that ball away. Brendan Rodgers brings him on. And then we're looking at certain players going, Kyogo had to be subbed again. What happens if Kuhn's not on form? Who does it for us? And then again, we've spoke about Kyogo a lot, but for me, top of the list is Hatate. Some absolutely terrible performances, and Luke McCowan was brutal yesterday, absolutely terrible. But Hatate is the senior guy out the two attacking them. He's the man that makes things tick, and he just kept making poor decisions when he got himself into decent positions. That cross, the shot that he probably should have crossed for Kyogo. Do that, Celtic get a goal earlier on. They stole that game, I think. And the one as well where he gets into the box and he tries to take an extra touch and he doesn't get the shot away. So many times in the game he'd get himself into great positions, and he blazed one over as well, a left-footed one. So there's just players like Kyogo and Hatate that are just not doing it right now. And if that was Engels is getting slated right now, and probably rightly so, but he doesn't have anything to fall back on. Kyogo and Hatate do. They've done it for Celtic, but you'd probably say they're playing just as bad as him just now.
What do you think? What do you think it is? I think there's a sort of. I wouldn't like to say they've taken the foot off the gas. And people will be listening to this. We'll get pelters for this. We absolutely will get pelters for talking about how the internet of all places is not a fair place. But I just think there's a sort of malaise. We're just not clicking in the way that we used to. There's a bit of a malaise about our not about the club. The club is obviously functioning fine, but there's a bit of malaise about the performances, and it is just unusual, isn't it, Stephen, to see so many players currently off the boil. I mean, you could point to absolutely everyone being off the boil, apart from maybe Callum McGregor, who hasn't been at his sparkling best. He's not beaten his best, but I thought he was one of the better players against Dundee United. It would be fair on the podcast after that match to point him out, but there are a number of players you can point to now going, Kyogo, Hatate, Engels, you have not been particularly good. Even AJ, I don't think was absolutely brilliant, really, up until he got his injury, and obviously Ralston's played. So there's a couple of players that are just not really firing, and I don't think the league's at any risk just now. But what I've noticed is these poor performances, they are sort of getting us closer and closer to stressful or difficult situations. All of a sudden, the young boys game takes on a whole different perspective now.
Must win, innit?
That's a must win for no reason, really. That's a must win at home, and they've got something now to come and protect. We nearly lost the cup to Rangers. Why? Because the performances weren't great, and then we've dropped points there against Dundee United. Why? Because the performances weren't great. So it's not enough to say, it's fine, we'll win the league eventually. That's really boring. That's a really boring way to watch football. But I mean, it is, and I do want to touch on the sort of internet sort of fandom, this weird phenomenon that's sort of hatched in the past couple of months. But there is consequences, or there can be consequences to playing crap.
Yeah, that's definitely true, and I think it is very boring to just look at a one-off draw, which isn't the end of the world, but also take in a wee bit of the bigger picture and think that Celtic haven't been clicking recently. But the balance to that is that it can happen during a season, particularly at this time of year. It's this time of year when people are playing, our players are playing a lot, and there's no January break this year, so it's just basically just games, right? So I do appreciate that there is a tiredness factor that basically comes in at this time of year. Players complain about it a lot, about how needlessly busy the Christmas and New Year
staff.
It's crazy. So it would be disingenuous of us to completely rule that out and say, I just got on with it, you get paid loads. I mean, they're human beings at the end of the day. Fatigue, that old Neil Lennon favourite, fatigue will come into
mitigating circumstances.
Yeah, but the good thing about this is that Celtic have bought themselves a brilliant position here, right? They've been an absolute winning machine this season and can afford now to drop a couple of points, and it really doesn't have that much of an impact. Now, going forward, that might be a concern if it would happen in several games in a row, which typically doesn't happen with Celtic. But I do take into account that the Zagreb game was a wee bit disappointing, because if you take it out of context, if you say before the game we're going to get an away draw in Europe, that's absolutely inarguably good, right? Judging just broadly speaking about football in general, an away result like that in Europe is good.
Oh, Stephen, you need to add a wee bit of context to Celtic away in Europe as well, don't you?
Of course. Especially Celtic in Europe, yeah. We've all been there. But there was a reason we were so ecstatic about the Atalanta game. Why was that? Because it's really, really hard to get a result there. So if we do that, then we do acknowledge the existence of context in these games. So Zagreb was a golden opportunity to get a win because, let's face it, they're a mediocre team with severe injury problems. So Celtic, in my opinion, should have won that. And it's not just about, oh, well, it's a draw, we move on. That's
even watching the 90 minutes, the way it panned out, you're like, we should be taking it to
so,
this.
So that's what I mean. But overall, it seems to point to a little bit of a dip for Celtic. I don't want to be alarmist. I don't think it's any more than that. And really, we're only talking about a difficult, slightly turgid 0-0 away to Dundee United. A Dundee United that were absolutely delighted to achieve a 0-0 draw. Again, that's their prerogative. I'm not going to do that thing where I sit and express or show my sour grapes. I'm not going to get my sour grapes out on the podcast. It's Christmas. It's so I'm not going to.
No one wants
that.
to see your old sour grapes.
So the time to do that is if you've won the game and then you've come up against a team that didn't want to attack and didn't want to. When you win, you come away and think, well, that's not a great approach. But if they've achieved it, so it would be inappropriate for me to moan about that. That was absolutely fine. He was more specific about it. He said that. Jim Goodwin, he said that how we went about it was we gave up the wide areas. They can cross all day long if we want. And see, to be fair to him, see if you see a team coming out that's got Yang in it, that's got no Alistair Johnston in it, that's got Maeda in it, and Greg Taylor,
Kyogo up front.
No,
the aerial presence.
That's exactly what to do. I can't fault him for that. We'll invite crosses all day long because we're not going to get any good crosses from those players that we've just mentioned, and we don't have necessarily the team up front.
Is that a worry though, Stephen, for a manager like Jim Goodwin, who he's a better football manager than me, but he's not a better football manager than Brendan Rodgers is. So
could he do what you do though? That's the real question.
Absolutely not. Yeah. Absolutely, but
probably it spurs him on.
We know what you mean by a world-class podcaster. He's sort of read Celtic like a book there, though, hasn't he? He's sort of read Celtic like a book, and he's thought, okay, because my next question to you, Melly, was what exactly happened? Like, it's all right to sit here and just say crap, but you need to try and find out, one, what's crap, and two, propose a solution. It's like my dad used to say, I don't like you. But it's you don't want to be a misery guts about it. But what is it that went wrong for Celtic at Dundee? What's been going wrong recently?
Well, it's different for each game, wasn't it? The Rangers games, the Rangers game, we seem to not. It's a cup final, so it's going to fall at that sometimes, isn't it? And you just don't know what way it's going to go. But this Dundee United game was more the bread and butter, wasn't it? Where, yes, we had lots of players out, so you've got the relationships aren't there on the pitch, but there's also individuals in there who just aren't doing it. Luke McCowan, nothing went right for the guy, picking up in good positions. Everything that's been good about him, we've seen in a Celtic jersey, just didn't happen for him. I don't know. It's one of those games for him. I'm not going to say he's a bad player and he's not worth playing in it like that. It's just a bad game for him. Hatate had another bad game to add to the ones he's had, and guys like Diaz and Maeda just had a match that he can have, and I'm not going to slate him at all because of everything he brings. Kyogo just isn't firing. He's had that goal against Hibs where he was a great finish, but apart from that, I'm reaching to find his other goal, and he's not really had a big goal, whether it be in Europe or against Rangers in the last 3-4 games, those games. So we're ticking back a bit there, and it just felt like one of those games. But watching the game, Celtic were 10-20 yards inside Dundee United's half. Like, Welsh and Scales were there, and it was a bit slow maybe, but those two guys aren't very good on the ball. So see, for them having to look at their touch and the fact that both of them play the ball behind each other and then they have to put their foot on the ball, move forward, just means Dundee United can get into that shape, and then when Celtic go to try and get out wide, by the time they're wide and getting at them, Dundee United are compact. They're in that 4-5 or that 5-4-1, and they know what they're doing. And look, Jim Goodwin isn't the best manager. We've slated on here plenty of times, but there's going to be games where you go, do you know what? I think I can get something against Celtic. And a post-cup final game with the amount of injuries and absences Celtic had, they probably thought, do you know what? This is the game. And I'm still a bit miffed as to why Kyogo keeps starting these games, because away from home, like in a game like that, sometimes you need to put the ball into the box and take the scraps, and we're just not doing that when Kyogo's playing. Even then, sometimes when he's playing, he drops off and he'll touch the ball back to a player, and I go, the technique on that guy is brilliant. But I've seen it once or twice in the last 2 games, and it's becoming a problem now that it just doesn't seem like he's fitting into this. Now, that's not just say it's all Kyogo's fault, because what does Kyogo thrive on? And that's chances. We've seen them bury him, but he's not getting as many chances. But when they do fall to him, like the one Ida put him through for, Kyogo usually buries that, but he get the ball stuck under him, or he got in front of it too much. It just wasn't working out. So I just think it's a culmination of everything here. Absent players, and we looked up and there's no Kuhn, so who's going to create here? We've got players who are off form, and you've got Dundee United who've been playing pretty well recently, and thought, we've got a plan here. Look, see if we just leave Yang on the ball, we don't really need to worry about it. And I think MD, that was still in the Yang gang, they've got to be done with it after that. And then Lewis Palmer coming on as well. Like, that squad depth. We've got a 30, what age is James Forrest now? 32,
I think, yeah.
33-year-old winger as our main guy if somebody's injured. That's something that needs addressed very quickly, because it's patent that Yang and Palmer are simply never, ever going to be the answer.
Does Brendan have a personnel issue, Stephen, with some of these players? Does he need to sort of look towards the transfer window coming in the next couple of weeks and be saying to Celtic, right, you really need to get me some bodies in here, you need to get me a midfielder, you need to get me at least 1, maybe 2 wingers, and we need to move some players out?
I'll come back in enough for Stephen on that one.
Well, on the positions themselves, I can already see the old familiar comments appearing as we near the kind of transfer window. I can see the familiar comments appearing about how we need a left back, we need a winger, we need a striker now as well. And I think a lot of people...
Tierney, Jota and Edwards.
Yeah, there we are. Get it done. An audacious triple swoop on January 1st to get them in. I can see it, and it's always the same positions that come up time and again around about this time of year. And I can see that, because I think a lot of people are quite alarmed by Kyogo's form now and how little it's working. What I would say in mitigation to that is that, not that this is a good thing, right? Not that this is like a encouragement for going forward. Last year, he did almost exactly the same thing. There was a period around about the same time last year. So he went from, I think he scored against Atletico Madrid in the end of October, and then he scored against Rangers at Celtic Park at the very end of the year, so the 30th of December, I think that was, but just before New Year. In that time, he only scored 2 goals, bookended by those 2 goals, so 4 in total. He scored 4 in 2 months. That's very similar to what he's kind of looking at just now. So it
doesn't show up for the winter games. That's
a fair weather Celtic fan, Celtic striker. But what I mean, that's not great news either. But all
is that Brendan's job though, when he's got a £9 million striker on the bench?
Well, that's the difference in it. I suppose the difference last year is that from October to December, all we had was right? And even then, it was clear quite early on that Brendan Rodgers never really fancied O was okay, right? He was an all right striker. He doesn't deserve to be in the total duds that we've had over the last decade. And I don't think he belongs there. But it was very clear early on that Brendan Rodgers just didn't want to play him at all. So that was the only option. That is the difference now, isn't it? That we've got a really solid option to take Kyogo out of the firing line. So he's not in great form. I don't really know what it is. That has led to, I suppose, the more seasons you go forward with a player, the more it becomes a matter of, is he looking to get out the door at some point soon? Because I've seen it suggested a few times that there's speculation involving him.
It would be surprising if he didn't, given the way that people's careers often pan out at Celtic. Very rarely do we get someone from abroad who comes to Celtic, stays for such a long time.
4 years is a lot. Yeah, that's an enormous.
It's unusual now, but I don't necessarily buy into it. I don't think the reason he's not playing well is because maybe he's looking for a move.
Not.
But I do think he's probably hit. He's one of several players just now that have hit poor form, and I can sympathise a wee bit with some of the. If Brendan's got Arne Engels, who maybe wants to take him out the limelight a wee bit, he's not playing particularly well. You drop him, you bring in Bernardo, that's fine. But if you've also got Hatate who's not playing well, and you've also got Luke McCowan who comes on, and he's been fine recently, but he's not playing well, you don't have an endless supply of midfielders to bring in when these guys are not playing well. So I can sympathise a wee bit with some positions not playing particularly well. The wingers are another one, I think. Yang is a very confusing player to me, because every time I look at him, I think, okay, there's at least at one time in a game he'll show me something, and then for 90 for 85 minutes and 30 seconds, he's rotten. But I always walk away remembering that one touch of that time he beat a guy.
For 4 minutes and 30 seconds. I think that worked out as well.
What a run.
I know.
Was it?
Yeah.
Listen, we're not here to do maths, all right? If I was any good at maths, I wouldn't be on a Celtic podcast.
He went on an astonishing run for 4.5 minutes,
Right.
during which he beat the entire team 4 times. It was incredible.
Do you know what? That is the sort of thing Young could probably do, and then he would fluff his lines at the very last moment.
Sorry, see, just before I want to tidy up where I was going with Kyogo, right? But because where I was going with that was that I said that I can already see the sort of alarm about Kyogo's form leading to chat about how we need a striker, and because we're so close to the transfer window and because he's been here for 3.5 seasons now, I think that has possibly heightened the is he maybe wanting to go. I would never draw a straight line between speculation over Kyogo leaving and him down in tools or anything like that. That's ludicrous. I mean, there would be no reason to level that at Kyogo whatsoever. So I just wanted to go back and tidy that up. I'm not saying that his head's been turned or anything like that. I'm just saying that it has. I'm saying that that it has kind of heightened the idea that we might need to kind of move on from Kyogo at some point. I don't think so. As I said, that it did happen last season and he recovered from that. But even that, last season wasn't his greatest goal scoring return either. And it's looking like maybe a kind of another one of those sort of 18, 19 goal seasons for Kyogo, hopefully, if he turns it around. But there's no getting away from the fact that his form has been a little bit disappointing recently, and it's confusing to a lot of people, probably including us, as we've already mentioned as well, with Ida, who looks dangerous basically every time he takes to the field, why he's not getting more starts, particularly in away games. Kyogo is absolutely deadly at Celtic Park, always has been, probably always will be for several more years if he was to stay as well. But these away games are starting to become more of a pattern, probably, where he's very ineffective, particularly if the team sets up like that, like Dundee United do. But that's no their problem. That's a problem for Brendan Rodgers to solve.
O'Malley, on you go. Let me just finish off what I'm saying about Yang. And I know people will be saying, well, Jamie, if you were good at maths, what would you be doing? Brain surgeon or something, I guess. But Yang, we just allow, or I personally allow Yang way more leeway than I've ever allowed any Celtic player, and all signs point to him being crap, really. And the only thing that makes me think he's not crap is the fact that Brendan keeps picking him, because he's no picking Lewis Palmer, but Lewis Palmer came on at the weekend, an absolute Hail Mary, and that guy is cooked. He is more cooked than the Christmas turkey, that guy. He needs to be. I managed to get one in. He's another one that I think in January we probably need to let him go, because every time he takes the field, he just serves up nothing but disappointment. And it's getting a bit tragic with Palma now, because he looks like a guy that's completely out the picture. So when you see him, you think, oh, this kind of reeks of a bit of desperation, like go on and see what you can do. And he never even looks like a player that's desperate to impress anymore. He just looks like a player that just can't do it, Melly.
No, it's a difficult one for him, because he's coming on, he's not fancied, and things aren't going well for him. And that is a deadly combination, because as soon as he tries to do something and it doesn't work out, the crowd just go, oh, come on, Palma. And he's not making the right decisions. Even if he was to simplify his game, it still wouldn't work for him. I just don't see it ever going to work for him. Yang, I've never thought he was going to be a player, so I'm disappointed that it's not worked out, because you'd always want to be proved wrong. Palma, I'm disappointed that I thought he was a player and he's turned out like this. It's just never going to work for him, and it's time to move on. Soon enough, that whole transfer window will hopefully be gone from Celtic, and we can just forget about it. It's only Bernardo that really survives. But the point being is that those guys aren't going to be the answer for Celtic, so that is a worry. And if you take Kuhn out, or Kuhn drops off form or gets injured, there's nobody there, especially with the Forest injury. And with Kyogo as well, he relies on guys creating chances for him. And if the wingers are those guys, that's not going to happen. But there's a problem for Celtic in the midfield, because Callum McGregor's going to play, that's fine. And before, it was Callum McGregor and Hatate, and then one of the other 3 guys will come in. Well, we've had Luke McCowan there with Hatate, and it didn't work out. We've had Bernardo no play and then be okay, but not be the Bernardo we think he could be. And then we've had Engels, who's just the last wee while it's no worked out from after a decent start. I mean, if you add that to a lack of supply from the wingers, Celtic have got a problem in here, because now, before we had 5 good options in midfield, now we've got one guy in Callum McGregor that's definitely going to start. And in the next game, I could ask both of you, who's your 2 starters? And you might give me 2 completely different players to go alongside them. That's a problem for Celtic and Brendan Rodgers right now. Last season, we had Matt O'Reilly, who you could rely on, who was basically brilliant for the full season. A wee dip off sort of around this time, but where we could rely upon him. We don't have that guy in the sort of advanced positions in midfield. And when you take that out, Celtic just aren't clicking in there. There's too many times where McGregor, the fullbacks or the defenders have the ball for far too long, and our midfielders aren't involved enough. Stephen, you talked recently about how little passes Engels had compared to the other 2 guys. It looks to me like none of our midfielders are getting on the ball and making those incisive passes now. Adding to that, you've got Yang and Palma in the wings. It was a bit of a recipe for disaster on Sunday.
I actually do think we could use a midfielder in there. I think there's space for one, especially if we look to maybe move Home on. I think we've got a space for maybe a...
He's not even been on a bench this
You
season.
forgot it. Home alone. Get him away. There's space for an 8, there's space for a 10. I think a sort of 8/10 in there. I
Are you
think
driving home out for Christmas?
Yes,
Yeah,
driving home. Very good. That's good. So I think there's definitely space. I'd be amazed if we didn't bring a winger in. I read an interview recently.
It's an absolute must. I know that we had this exact conversation. So when was that? That was in October, was it? The midweek game against Dundee that Palma and Yang both played, and we came away from that thinking neither of them can play ever again because they're absolutely terrible. And here we are a couple of months later. No, it's unfortunate, of course. Like Kuhn being out and then Forrest being out, medium term now for 6 weeks means that we've been forced into playing these. But again, I sense that people are willing, much like you, Jamie, they're willing Yang to do something for Celtic.
Not anymore. I'm not.
You're done with it. But Palma, as you say, is cooked. But there is that lingering hope out there. It'll inevitably, because we're heading to January, it'll inevitably turn to the he needs a loan thing. But what I would say about that is Celtic have got currently about 9 or 10 players out on loan, and none of them are ever going to kick a ball.
I'll loan him as airfare to get to.
So no, a winger's an absolute must. It's not going to work out for these guys longer term, because I think the game that Yang had that was good against Dundee, the 7-1 game, that amazing game at Celtic Park, that was in February, and he's not done anything since. I know that his career was somewhat delayed, or Celtic run was somewhat derailed rather by that Hearts sending off, but that's a long time ago as well. Yeah. And we're dealing with absolutely nothing from the two of them.
9 months.
That's it. And look, Palma, at the very least, at one point, Palma, at least he carried a goal threat. That was the main thing about him. When you think back, it seems unthinkable now because you see what he's like now when he plays, but that seems to have been completely eroded from his character, from his playing makeup, because when he first joined, we were pretty excited about it because we laughed at Michael Beale having said that he didn't want Palma. And
I kind of hope you wouldn't bring that up.
So, needless to say, he had the last slebbery laugh and was chortling away. But when he first arrived, he was scoring every 2 or 3 games, Palma, or creating something. I remember a beautiful cross he put in for the aforementioned goal. That's got a couple of mentions for him at Celtic Park as well. He looked like every time he got the ball, he carried a threat. That's all completely gone. So the two of them are basically a couple of wingers who cannot create anything between them. They never look like they're going to score or create a goal for anyone else. So I think a winger is at least one winger is an absolute must for January. Yeah.
I saw an interview with Chris Garden saying that he's 100% ready to move on from Brøndby and he wants to get it done as soon as possible. And I'd be very interested to see if Celtic maybe didn't go back in for him. But I think we're definitely going to end up with a winger in January. I just think it's unthinkable that we won't, and we'll be linked to a few already. Kieran Tierney, the rumours that KT's coming back. The rumour as it stands just now is that Gucci Greg might be off to the MLS, and we're looking to bring Kieran Tierney back, and another Kieran Tierney being homegrown ticks that box. Kieran Tierney being younger than Callum McGregor, so effectively someone to be Celtic captain when Callum McGregor eventually moves on because he can't play forever.
No,
just you wait and see.
Why has he got another 4 years or something?
I don't know. Well, this comes around to my point, my ultimate point about KT. Look, we all love KT version 1.0, but I don't think there's any denying, Melly, that he's a very different player now. Like, if we can keep him fit and he can play he'll be absolutely excellent. But I don't want him brought back as some sort of pseudo mascot. You know what I mean? Let's try and relive the old times and wheel Kieran Tierney out for 15 games a season. And I don't want it to be all a bit sad and a bit sort of half-arsed. I've said before that Celtic are absolutely addicted to continuity, and I really believe that. I think we are, and there's lots of players at this club, relatively speaking, actually there's probably only a handful of players who I just get the feel wouldn't be at any. If Celtic weren't Celtic, there are players. I'm not going to be disrespectful again before Christmas and name them, right? But who would they be employed by Celtic if it wasn't Celtic in the way that we operate? And I think you kind of know who I'm talking about. There's a couple of defenders at the club who are just nowhere near good enough, but because they're Celtic boys and they came through, and we feel the need to keep them around. So there's this thing at Celtic where they're sort of addicted to the continuity. So look, Katie's a terrific player, and I loved him. I honestly loved watching him. It's absolutely iconic in that New Balance shirt, getting his face smashed and all the rest of it. Brilliant footballer. I love the guy, but I just think if we brought him back, I'd want that again. And then the question is, do we really play the way that KT plays? Is he the kind of fullback? I know I've said before that AJ gives me KT vibes, that I think that he's quite similar to the way that Kieran Tierney was, but I just don't know if Kieran Tierney can be that player anymore, Melly.
It's a difficult one for me because he's my second favourite ever Celtic player. And
who's your first?
Yang.
Ralston. I love him with all my heart. So rumours of him and Jota coming back, I'm going to spontaneously combust.
The Jota thing's not happening. Come on, it's not happening.
But Kieran Tierney, for me, it's difficult because MD says they don't want to sign him. I just want to say, grow up. He's absolutely brilliant, and he's in an Arsenal team that kind of played similar. The reason he sort of dropped out of that team is because they played the inverted fullbacks, and Arteta didn't think he'd do it. But I'm like you, I think he could do that role with Celtic. I think what he's got is that ability to be inside but burst on the outside and go round and overlap like Johnston does. I would love him back. If there's any way Celtic can do it, I would do it. But for the love of God, Celtic, you need to manage this stuff. You cannot do. The reason he's like this now is because of Celtic and what they done to him when he's first stint. Having a guy coming through so young, he had to go off his first season a lot of time, made it through it, built him up to a good player, played him every single game. League Cup games against Kilmarnock, he was getting wheeled out, and then the next season he gets injured a lot. But the big problem with that was we didn't have another left back. We did not have another left back at the club. We started playing Calvin Miller there, and he wasn't a left back either.
Yeah.
So Celtic need to be smart with this. If they're going to bring him back, you need to do it properly, and we need another option there. But I believe Celtic could get Kieran Tierney back to a good player. He's coming up to an age where he's not played a lot of football recently. What moves haven't worked out for him. He's not playing at all now. He needs to be playing football.
He's 27. For those who may not have been tracking his birthdays, he's 27.
Still plenty of time in him. Yeah, he should be coming into his peak years. Hopefully he knows his body a bit better now, because that's the sort of time where you sort of footballers might learn that what they can do and what they can't do. But if they can bring him back, do it. But we need to do it properly.
But this is the sort of what Melly's saying is the case for bringing back Kieran Tierney. Is if you can manage these things, if you can look after his injuries, if he can keep himself fit, if Celtic sort of play by the rules, as it were, and make sure that he's wrapped in cotton wool, then you will get the best out of Kieran Tierney in theory, and he won't find himself injured. We all get that, Stephen. That's the whole point. You're saying Kieran Tierney. But the reality of Kieran Tierney is that he seems to me, do you know what? I'm going to scratch that. Not the reality. My perception of Kieran Tierney is that he frequently gets injured, and they're never a week here and a week there. He frequently gets injured, and he's out for months.
Well, he's barely played since the Euros, has he? I think he's barely kicked a ball since then, and that was a good while ago now, yeah.
So that's the reality of getting Kieran Tierney. It'd be great if you could maintain him and keep him fine and get him serviced and MOT'd every year and topped up with oil. But the reality, the fact is that he's a luxury player who is great on his day, but is just injured a lot. And I'm not saying don't bring him back, don't waste my money on him. That's not the angle I'm coming from. I'm saying, are we just getting ourselves signed up for disappointment here?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I take on board all of the points being made about Kieran Tierney. I think it is a tricky one, because on the surface of things, you think, right, Kieran Tierney is a player of the quality that Celtic can't afford to sign. And so therefore, on that basis alone, then you just get the deal done and worry about it later. But that's purely on that basis. The other side of that coin is that the only reason Celtic can possibly afford to bring in that player of quality that we can't afford is because of the state of him these days, and he can't get near any football for Arsenal. Now, that's not to say that he couldn't stay in England. I'm sure he's still a very passionate Celtic fan, and that would be his preference to come back. I mean, I'm sure someone like, I don't know, Bournemouth or Everton or something like that would possibly take a punt on Kieran Tierney. So I don't think Celtic will be his only option. However, from our angle, the only reason that this deal would even be possible is if he was to take a severe pay cut and come back up to Celtic because he really wants to. I've seen it a lot. And this point that you're making, Jamie, about how if we manage it, if we do everything right, because I've seen a few comments, and I'm only using these to like highlight the general tone of the stuff that we've already discussed. And it's like, if we manage it properly, then there's no reason that we can't get 40 games a season out of Kieran Tierney. And I'm like, well, what do you mean by manage it properly? Because presumably the other clubs he's been at have considered that, have tried everything they possibly can.
Who's got the better doctors, Celtic or Arsenal?
Well, yeah, that's exactly it. And what I would say about we can get him playing 40 games a season thing is that he hasn't done that once since he left. The last time he played 40 games in any season was 2018-19, 5 years ago. It was the last time he managed 40 games in a season.
And he was still out for 3 weeks with a calf injury then.
Is that right?
I've got his injury record.
Okay,
here,
so and then look, a good Celtic season will be at least 55, 60 games, right? So you're already looking at least 20 games where you would have to manage the minutes here and there with a supplementary left back. No against that. That's a good thing. That's a good position for Celtic to be in. So I'm not against that. I just can't help shake that nagging concern that it just would be a big disappointment, a big sort of fanfare coming back, and you think, oh, it's going to be great. Let's get them all back. Dembele, Stuart Armstrong, Paddy Roberts. Let's get them all home. But he would be just terribly injured. So see that.
If he wasn't Kieran Tierney, how would people feel about this transfer? If we were signing Arsenal's left back that hardly plays because he's injured, and he doesn't get many games, how would we feel about it? I think there'd be equal reservations about it and not as much positivity.
Yeah, it depends on the deal, doesn't it? He's got 6 months left in his deal. Arsenal have got an option to give him another one at the end of the season, but that's past now, so they're not going to do that. So he's out of contract in the summer. If we can get him on a loan to the end of the season, see how it works out, and then maybe work something out from there. But they also run the risk of Kieran Tierney comes to Celtic, keeps himself fit, plays very well, and other teams go, do you know what, we'll go in for him and a Bosman as well. But are we at the point now where people have been saying all along, we've never replaced Kieran Tierney, and now we're going to replace Kieran Tierney with Kieran Tierney? No, we can't do that.
Kieran Tierney.
we can't do that.
So here's the injuries. This is what you're dealing with Kieran Tierney, because this is the whole package. And listen, just for the record, I honestly love the guy. Yeah. So, but this is the bare facts of it, right? 16-17, he missed 85 days with torn ankle ligaments. Stephen, the season you're talking about, 17-18, he missed 3 weeks. With a calf injury, right? The following season, he missed a week. Nothing really worth talking about there. That's only the first page of his sort of transfer market injury history. 18-19, 77 days out, then 5, then 13, then another 33. So in 18-19 season, he missed 120 odd games of football.
120 days.
120 days. 120 games of football.
Oh, they work them hard in there, don't they?
I missed them, I know. I missed those games as well. Right, then you're moving into 2021 season, 14, 9, 28, 38 days. I mean, it's really masses of days. 2021, 98 days and 16 days separately. 23, 24, hamstring, 54 days, 29 days, 17 days out again. And then 24, 25, you missed 159 days. And the problem as well I'm noticing here is they're not all the same thing. It's not like a recurrent ankle injury. It's hamstring, it's abductor, it's ankle, it's shoulder, it's groin, it's hip. There's a lot. There's a lot there.
So on that basis, right? I'm no expert, of course, right? If you want medical information, probably go
Google
elsewhere.
Go on the Joe Rogan podcast if you want. You'll find it there.
If you want medical advice, sign up to our Patreon, and I'll happily do it on there. But no. I'm no expert, of course, but just knowing what I know about football over decades now of following it, right? Again, not an expert, but just as an observer. With that level of injuries, of course, a lot of them have been since he's left Celtic. And when we're talking about getting him to patching him up, putting him up together with sellotape and making him play 40 games a season as a bare minimum if we manage him properly, I think there is very little chance of what Melly said being true. And what he said that was that heading towards 27 or 27 now, he should be heading to his peak years. I don't think there's any chance that that is realistic. I think there's very little chance of him being a better player now at 28 than he was at 22 because of the physical toll that this has had on Kieran Tierney. Now, I want to be clear, that is not to say that he is a write-off. He can't play for Celtic. It'd be a waste of time.
Still better than two options we have right now.
Correct, right. He's still a very, very good left back. But what I mean is, I think we can probably forget that angle where we're bringing him back at the very peak of his career. I think that's probably unlikely. And my overriding feeling would be that we are getting very much damaged goods when it comes to Kieran Tierney. How damaged? I've absolutely no idea. I'm sure he could still do a job. And quite frankly, Brendan Rodgers, he's not going to treat Celtic as a charity case for his pals and players he's had before. That's not the case. If Brendan Rodgers wants him at the club, it's because he thinks he can do a job, and presumably he's not just winging it. He's not just going, Kieran Tierney, I remember that guy for 5 years ago. I'll probably.
Does that mean they've made up? Because remember Tierney's told him that story. Off when
that story. No, listen, but I just want to interject, Stephen, with the alternative scenario is Brendan's approach saying, look, we can bring Kieran back, or he might just be told, look, we're going to bring Kieran back in January, we'll see how we got on with him, and Brendan might go, that's fine, but you'll need to get me another one. You'll need to get me another one, and so it might not be as black and white as I want him, no I don't. There might be a grey area where Brendan says, oh cool, Kieran Tierney, yeah, terrific player, if we keep him fit he'll be a great addition, but you'll need to go and get me another guy.
Right, see, saying all of that, Celtic have the opportunity to sign Kieran Tierney. Do you okay it, or do you...
Of course I do.
But I said this about Freddie Lundberg and Carlton Cole and all these other guys that I liked
extreme, but they were only well into their 30s.
Can I just shock you? Sign Kieran Tierney regardless, despite what I said earlier.
The last 15 minutes, just sign him.
Listen, people will be listening to this at Christmas time, on Christmas Eve, probably when this goes out, people will be listening to it, and it would be remiss of me not to mention the fact that you two have got Christmas jumpers on. I didn't wear mine because Christmas is woke nonsense. Stephen, what have you got in yours for that?
It's happy holidays now, isn't it?
If you say Merry Christmas, you'll get locked in jail these days. What's your Christmas jumper? Just generic Merry Christmas?
Merry Christmas. I believe it's like a polar bear. Yeah, polar bear with a little hat on there. Yeah.
And Melly, what have you got?
Let
me have a look.
Celtic.
Celtic gnome.
Gonk. I think those are called gonks. I think those things are called gonks.
What about the jumper?
Hey, fucking got you an absolute topper there, Melly. You taking that Christmas time, I know. I was on the internet and I was looking up things. And I was looking up things, and I'd noticed this groundswell of opinion after the Celtic game, right? And I wouldn't mention if it was just one guy, but it was loads of people. And do you remember how the Celtic Daz on the internet used to say, if you hated this, you would have hated the 90s. You weren't alive in the 90s. And you know how we've smothered that pattern in his sleep? Like we've grabbed that pattern as a collective here, and you can't get away with that anymore. People just laugh at it. It's cliched and it's beyond the parody, right? But that's been replaced with this thing where people go, look at yous all losing your minds. If you'd offered us 2 drop points in 16 games and 9 points clear December, you'd taken it. Maybe you should watch another team. You think to yourself, how boring, man. What a boring way to watch football.
Why do you bother watching at all if it's zero context?
See if that's your opinion. Honestly, just watch the first game. I like the new strip, and then come and see us in May, and then we'll have to talk about it. Because
look at the Wikipedia in May, see what Celtic did.
And it's not directed at us, by the way. People aren't saying this to us, although they probably will after this podcast. It's just like a general thing that I've seen online. I don't know if it's a new internet phenomenon or a new type of opinion that fans have developed. This thing where the 90 minutes doesn't matter, and if somebody's Engels, if he's playing crap, you're not allowed to say it because the boy will come good. Well, I might, but I'm talking about the new. I'm moaning about the crap I watched against Dundee United. Leave me alone.
I think people think it's like there's some sort of new phenomenon, this new breed of fans that can't take it and they're entitled to it. If this is just the type of stuff that would be happening in every pub after every game in the world. Like, people just go and talk about the game that just happened, and that's what this is. That's what our podcast is weekly. We talk about what's just happened, and as well as trying looking at the bigger picture. So, I don't really get it's like charging to the internet to tell everybody they're panty wetters and all that. All we're doing is saying
panty wetters.
But that's the phrase.
Panty wetters, you mean?
No. I've seen.
Have you seen panty wetter?
Panty wetters horrible.
I've never seen panty wetter. That's
so
weirdly sexual.
It's troubling. But look, again, if you are incapable of having nuanced conversations about whether Celtic are either perfect, it's sharp, it's absolutely brilliant. Like, we've won we won a treble 2 seasons ago, and all that, and then that's the only context, and all the way down to everything's shite. If there's nothing that can exist in between, then grow up, as Melly said. You thought I was going to say switch off, didn't you? No, grow up.
Well, the reason you can never recover for a grow up, by the way.
No.
Just as a tip, if you're ever having an argument with somebody, it works especially well with your boyfriend or girlfriend. If you just thought, grow up, there's no coming back. That ends the argument. You're done. Listen, on that, and the reason I bring that up is because I want to extend goodwill to all men, including internet moaners, and I want to wish those guys and the listeners and Celtic and Brendan Rodgers and Gucci Greg Taylor a very Merry Christmas. Mark Melly, would you like to say Merry Christmas to the boys and girls before we go?
Merry Christmas, one and all.
Stephen?
Yeah.
Are you going to sing? You want to sing Silent Night? No, don't. No, I'm not going to let him because he will.
And on this,
told me, and on this bombshell, thank you so much for your support this year. You fucking right, I'm just going to kill it. Thank you so much for your support this year. Thank you especially to the people that support us on Patreon. And yes, we will be back next week. Support us on Patreon. Patreon.com/20minute tips.